Welcome to the Language Alchemy Podcast, where you transform how you communicate to create the life and relationships you truly want. I'm your host, Alejandra Siroka, and I help multicultural individuals, couples, and change makers move beyond surface level politeness and conflict avoidance to have authentic, value-based interactions that actually resolve issues and deepen connection. If you're tired of rehashing conversations in your head, walking on eggshells, or feeling misunderstood in your most important relationships, this podcast will give you a new way forward. And if you've been thinking about getting support with your communication, visit languagealchemy.com to find out which transformative communication program is most beneficial for you. I'm so grateful you're here. Whether this is the first time you're listening or you've been listening to the Language Alchemy podcast for a while, thank you for being here. Today, we are ending the mini-series on passive-aggressive communication. We started the series with episode 182, in which we talked about what passive aggression is and why it happens. Then, in episode 183, we talked about the impact of passive aggression in our relationships. In episode 184, we looked at how to transform passive aggression and what to do instead. And today, in part 4, the last part of this mini-series, we are going to talk about how to respond skillfully when others communicate with passive aggression with you. Now, while I encourage you to listen to the complete mini-series, you get to choose if you want to go to episode 182 and start there, or to listen to this episode right now and then check out the previous 3 episodes of the mini-series. And as you may know, I like to start with examples to get you immersed in the topic. So let's start with this example. Let's say you get an email from a colleague saying, "Thanks for finally getting back to me on this. I know you have so many important things going on." Even though it's a short email, you read it twice, maybe 3 times. The words seem polite enough, except for 2 words, finally and important. You don't trust your colleague's expression of gratitude or that they truly see how much you have going on. So you're unsure about how to respond. Are they mad at you? Do you need to apologize? Should you ignore it? Just let it go? Would it be useful to respond and confront them? Now, even though you do have a lot going on, you spend the next hour typing and deleting responses, and your stress level increases with each version. This is what it's like to be on the receiving end of passive-aggressive communication. It's stressful, confusing, and it can leave you questioning your own perception. If you've been in this situation, and I think most of us have, because unfortunately passive aggression is very common, for reasons I explained in episode 182, then you are going to get a lot out of this episode, because today we are going to talk about how to respond mindfully and compassionately with someone who uses passive-aggressive communication. And we are going to explore strategies that honor your peace while potentially opening a path to more authentic connection. Let's start by acknowledging that you have no control of how others communicate. Yeah, you can't make someone communicate directly if they're not ready, they don't know how, or at the very least, they're not willing to express what they feel, want, need, or value. But this doesn't mean all is lost. No, because we always have the discernment and the responsibility to choose how to respond when others communicate with us. And you have the power to create the conditions that make direct communication more possible. This is the beauty of language alchemy as an awareness practice. You start by becoming aware of what's within your control, your own reactions, your own communication. your own boundaries, the way you listen, and you also become aware of what you need to let go of, like managing others, wanting to fix them, trying to make them change, as well as disconnecting from your own sense of capacity when they say something you don't like, you feel offended by or hurt. Now, let me be clear that I'm not saying you should accept or enable toxic communication or abusive comments. No, I am talking about not losing our sense of power and ability every time we receive a passive-aggressive comment. When someone communicates with passive aggression, it's helpful to remember what's likely happening beneath the surface. We talked about this in depth in episodes 182 and 183, but a brief refresher. When someone is communicating with passive aggression, they are probably feeling unsafe expressing their needs or their feelings directly, or they don't know how to do it. Or they're communicating that way because that is the kind of communication they learned from their family. Or maybe they could be feeling powerless in this particular situation and considering that you have more power than they do. Or they may be trying to avoid a conflict with you or experiencing a sense of rejection. And again, this doesn't excuse the behavior or mean you have to accept it. But remembering why passive aggression happens can help you respond with compassion rather than with reactivity. You can think of passive-aggressive communication as smoke signals. The person is trying to tell you something, but they don't know how to do it directly. Your job isn't to decode the message perfectly or to fix their communication. What you need to do instead is to respond in a way that's aligned with your values and to invite, but not demand, more authentic communication. Let me give you an example. Say you have a teenage kid, and when you set a boundary like no screens after 9 p.m., your kid says with a smirk, "Sure, whatever you say," in a tone with total sarcasm, and then they slam their bedroom door behind them. So you respond angrily, "Don't use that tone with me," or "This is exactly the kind of behavior that shows me you're not mature enough to handle more freedom." Yikes. But if you step back and consider what might be happening for your teenage kid, you may understand that your kid is being passive-aggressive because they may feel powerless and unheard. Teenagers are trying to assert independence while still being dependent on their parents. From the perspective of the teenager, that feels hard. Okay, so we can extend compassionate understanding to our kid using passive-aggressive communication with us. And again, this doesn't mean I'm advocating for being okay with or accepting our kids' passive-aggressive behavior. But if we understand it with compassion, that compassion is likely to be there when you respond to the passive-aggressive comment. And now let's get practical. Here are some specific transformative communication tools you can use in the face of passive-aggressive communication. I'm going to offer you 4 tools you can use depending on the situation and the relationship. Because remember that conscious communication depends on the context, the relationship, and the current circumstances. So, tool number 1, remain neutral. Passive-aggressive communication often elicits guilt, defensiveness, provocation, or reactivity. Your first tool is simple: remain neutral. So, when your in-law says something like, "Oh, don't worry about me. We're used to spending the holidays alone," you might feel a surge of guilt and then react to the guilty feeling by defending yourself, over-explaining, or even worse, promising something you know you can't fulfill. Instead, you could simply respond with a neutral acknowledgement that doesn't take responsibility for the other person's feelings or compromises your own boundaries. In this case, you could say something like, I hear that you'd like us to be able to travel to you this year and that you're sad we won't be able to spend the holidays with you. That's it. Tool number 2, name what you are experiencing. One of the greatest things you can do is gently name the incongruence you are experiencing. Now, your tone of voice is key here. Before you say something, check your intention. If your intention is to express what you are experiencing in order to create an opening for more authentic communication, then your tone of voice will reflect that. But if your intention is about attacking or accusing, even if you are naming what you are experiencing, your response will also carry passive aggression. So first, you check your intention, and then you anchor yourself in your value, for example, of authenticity. You might say something like, I notice your words say one thing, but your tone seems to suggest something else. Is there something you'd like to talk about? Or, I'm sensing there might be something you are not saying directly, and I'm happy to hear what's on your mind. Or maybe, your facial expression shows that you might be upset about something. I'd like to understand what's going on for you. I want to tell you a story of a client who used this tool. Let's call my client Sunita. Sunita constantly received passive-aggressive comments from her sister about parenting. In our work together, Sunita learned to respond to her sister's passive aggression by calling in the love that she had for her sister, and then anchoring herself in that love to share what she was experiencing. One time, she said to her sister something like, it seems that you have concerns about how we are raising the kids. I'd like to hear your thoughts directly. Would you be willing to share them with me? This did something unexpected. Sunita's sister was quiet for a moment, and then Sunita told me that her sister's eyes filled with tears, and she said, Sunita, you used to ask me about everything. You always wanted my advice, even about what to wear to go to a casual party. I just feel like I'm not needed anymore. Like, since you became a mom, my experience doesn't matter. That was the real issue, not disagreement about parenting, but feeling irrelevant. And once it was named directly, they could actually address it beautifully. Tool number 3, set clear and firm boundaries. You heard me talk about boundaries in the previous episode, so I'm not going to repeat what I said here. But in this episode, I would like to say that sometimes, despite your best efforts to invite direct communication, passive-aggressive communication continues. This is when you need to set clear and firm boundaries. That may sound like, if there's something you need to tell me, if you're upset with me in any way, please say it directly. I cannot allow myself to stay in this conversation and have to guess what's happening for you. Or, I don't feel safe continuing this conversation. Let's take a break and come back to this later. If we go back to the example of you being a parent of a teenager who reacted with passive aggression, you could set a boundary by saying, I understand you're upset about the screen time rule. I'm happy to discuss it with you when you can express your concerns directly. But we're not going to talk about this if there's sarcasm or door slamming. If you set clear and firm boundaries, the key here is that you remain consistent and that you keep your boundaries. Passive aggression will not change overnight, but if you respect your own boundaries and you hold yourself and the other person with compassion, The boundaries can guide the other person to communicate more directly with you. And tool number 4, model and acknowledge direct communication. One of the most powerful things you can do is to model the communication you want to hear. And also, when you hear shifts in the other person's communication, acknowledge them. So if someone in your life has the habit of communicating with passive aggression, be the person who expresses feelings, needs, and values directly. Show what authentic communication sounds like. When you are disappointed, say so. When you need something, ask for it. When you feel hurt, express it vulnerably. And of course, this doesn't guarantee that the other person will follow your lead, but it creates an environment where direct communication is normalized and safe. And then, if the other person does start to communicate more directly with you, acknowledge them and let them know how good their direct communication is. You could say something like, I really appreciate you telling me how you feel about this because your feelings are important to me. Or, thank you for saying that you needed me to let you talk during the meeting. That let me know how to support you. And that is what I'm here to do. Before we end this episode, it's important to know that you don't need to address every single instance of passive-aggressive communication. Sometimes, especially in relationships that are not intimate ones, like with coworkers you see once in a while, extended family you're not very close to, or neighbors you run into here and there, the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself and for the other person is to let the passive aggression go. Of course, this doesn't mean accepting abuse or enabling toxic communication patterns, but really being the authority of your own experience and honoring yourself and your values. Sometimes this may mean remaining neutral and responding with empathy. Other times, it may mean going deeper in a conversation and expressing your experience. Some other times, it may mean setting a clear and firm boundary. While other times, it may mean choosing not to engage and focusing your energy elsewhere. If you choose that, then that would mean limiting contact to what's absolutely necessary, or adjusting your expectations about what this relationship can be so that you do not set yourself up for disappointment, or seeking support from a therapist or a communication coach. And in extreme cases, this might mean creating significant distance or even ending the relationship. What matters here is that you get to discern and then decide. And now let's recap what you've heard in this episode. We started with the truth that you can't control someone else's communication. You can only be responsible of your own. When the people in your life use passive aggression to communicate with you, you do not need to react. You can choose to respond. I taught you 4 transformative communication tools to do so. Number 1, remain neutral. Number 2, name what you're experiencing. Number 3, set clear and firm boundaries. Number 4, model and acknowledge direct communication. We also talked about how sometimes, despite your best efforts, you continue being the recipient of passive aggression. And in these cases, depending on the relationship, you may need to decide to let it go, limit contact, or end the relationship to honor your well-being. Now, remember, responding skillfully to passive-aggressive communication, it's about staying aligned with your values, cultivating authenticity and peace, and inviting, without demanding, more authentic connection. So there you have it. This concludes our 4-part mini-series on passive-aggressive communication. I hope these episodes have given you not just transformative communication tools, but also compassionate understanding for yourself and for others who are struggling with this challenging and unfortunately pervasive communication pattern. If this series resonated with you, I'd be deeply grateful if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your reviews help other multicultural change makers and couples find these resources for communicating with greater awareness and compassion. And please, share these episodes with someone who might benefit, whether they are struggling with their own passive-aggressive patterns or they're trying to navigate relationships in which there's passive-aggressive communication. These tools can help create more peace and authentic connection. Thank you so much for being part of this community of people committed to transforming communication and bringing more love and more peace into the world for the benefit of all beings. Thank you so much for listening, and a special thanks to all the change makers listening from Central and North America. And more specifically, thank you to all of you listening from Costa Rica, Panama, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Canada, and the United States. Until next episode, and as we say in Argentina, ciao ciao! Original music by Gary Lapo. You can find all links in the show notes at languagealchemy.com.